Welcome to Growing Your Firm, brought to you by Jetpack Workflow. We're here to help firms unlock the secrets to help you reach your goals faster. And now, here's your host, founder and CEO of Jetpack Workflow, David Cristello.
Hey everybody, Dave Cristello here, founder and CEO of Jetpack Workflow and host of Growing Your Firm podcast. Today's guest is Deneen Diaz. She is the Vice President of Growth Strategic Partnerships at BotKeeper. Prior to that, she spent over a decade at CPA.com, really helping some of the top 100 firms go through digital transformation. We're going to unpack what that means, and we're really going to unpack what is this world of CaaS? What does it really mean? Where do you really start? What does a successful rollout and implementation and scale up of CaaS look like? And what are some of the implications of this world of AI as it relates to how firms are thinking about building out their CaaS teams or departments or scaling them up? But first and foremost, Deneen, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I have spent the last 16 years helping firms build a CaaS practice. And so, as you noted, I spent 13 years at CPA.com. So that's starting back in 2008, when no one even heard the word CaaS. No one was even talking about CaaS. But back then, CPA.com had a vision of that technology was really going to change the way firms could see their clients' data real time. And so starting was the cloud. The cloud is what really started this trend of being able to see your clients' data faster so that you could advise on that data. And so CPA.com has a workshop on how to build a digital CaaS practice that I have worked with hundreds of firms that have gone through that workshop. I facilitated that workshop. And then about 3 years ago, moved to BotKeeper. And the reason I was attracted to BotKeeper is I was watching the trend of AI, and I was seeing how AI was coming into the profession. And so sort of like I brought the cloud to firms, now I'm bringing AI to firms because it is the technology that's really changing the way firms, like when I think about it, is how they get their revenue. So traditionally, firms for the last how many years have gotten revenue from tax and audit. But what's shifted, and again, it's because of technology and because firms can have their clients' data real time, this shift into having the accounting side be the number one revenue generator and the one that's growing the fastest. And what I believe is also the future is this advisory space.
So let's unpack what the words advisory space mean. And by the way, maybe we've seen this a lot in our community. That's where we originally connected, was just seeing this transformation happen with some of the firms we're working with, where it's heavy tax and audit, and they see this growth. They're kind of bundling their services. They're going subscription services. They are thinking about a broader sense than just maybe compliance work. But when you say advisory, what's an example of how this is being implemented?
I should say client advisory services, because I do think I'm seeing this trend mostly with larger firms where they're offering all kinds of advisory services. It can be HR advisory services. It could be digital advisory services. It could be technology advisory services. I mean, larger firms are moving into all of these new areas under this like consulting part.
Do you think that'll work? Do you think that will work, by the way? Do you think it will get overly complicated, or do you think bundling everything, like bringing in HR? Yeah.
Yeah. I think clients trust their accountant. And I think, who else do clients talk to about their financials? Really? Like, they might talk to their friend, they might talk to their spouse, but really, who do they talk to about the successes that they're having or the failures that they're having, or they made a bad decision and how it's affecting their business, right? And they might not even tell their spouse that they've had a bad month and that they're not doing well. So who else really does a business owner have to talk to other than their accountant? And so having the accountant be able to say, I can help you in so many other areas than just tax and audit. I can help you digitize. I can help you bring more technology to your books. I can help you with your HR services. You're too small to have an HR person? That's okay. My firm offers those services. And so, yes, I do think that there's a plethora of new services firms are primed to deliver. But for purposes of this webinar, where my passion lies, it is really the client advisory services. Some people call it client accounting and advisory services. And by the way, there's lots of different names for it. There's FA&O, Financial Advisory Outsourcing. There's FOA. There's Virtual Advisory Services, VAS, right? Call it what you want. Some call it BOSS, bookkeeping outsourcing services. There's lots of different names, but the one that's stuck lately is the CAS. That CAS now is something that all firms are talking about. Managing partners are talking about it. They're building it. They're running towards it. And by the way, that's a firm we use. Clients still call a firm and say, "Can I buy your CAS services?" So that's really a firm term. It's not a client term. Clients are calling firms saying, "I need help. I need help with my business." They're saying, "I know my books are a mess. I don't need you just to clean up my books. I know my books are a mess, but I want help with my business. I want help understanding how to grow my business. I want help." And that's where it's different than just doing the compliance work. It's really looking at the trends in your client's data and advising them on how to make some changes in their business so that they can be more profitable. So that's why the cloud allows firms to offer this. You need to be looking at your client's data constantly, not once a year. And I would say not twice a year. You want to be looking at their data every single month so that you can start consulting with them on how to grow their business.
Yeah, I love that. And given you've been seeing this trend, working with firms since '08, you probably have a greater pattern recognition of, okay, we're 15 years into this journey.
Yeah.
Some firms have adopted it early on.
Yep.
And so the ones that were, they're in year 5 through 10 of building CAS or whatever they call it, what have you seen that they've learned that has been working well, that they've kind of doubled down on? Like what, for the more people that, they've been in CAS for a year, 2 years, 3 years.
Yeah.
What are they adjusting to do even better in 4, 5, and 6?
Yeah, I can tell you, when I talk to a firm, immediately if I'm talking to them, like, you're 3 years into this journey, right? Or you're 5 years down this journey, or you're just starting this journey. I can hear, and there's some triggering things that they say that I hear, right? And I would say, and this is just me thinking, so don't really quote me on this, it also could be a revenue, because I see a shift happening when CAS comes to about $2 million in revenue. I tend to see a shift that happens also from a revenue perspective. Firms early on in the journey probably don't have a CAS leader. So typically it's a partner, managing partner that's like, "I want to build this." And they'll designate it to somebody. And now that person now has taken this on, right? And they stumble. It's really hard because they're coming up against the partners that are tax and audit partners that are making all the future decisions for the firm. And they don't really have a seat at the leadership table. And so they struggle. They really, really struggle, right? And it's hard building a team if you don't have a leader leading the team, right? And then I can tell further down the journey, like 2, 3 years in, they're like, "Okay, we've made a lot of mistakes," or it's growing, but now, wow, we really need to focus on this. So we need to dedicate a CAS leader. And then when that leader comes in, that leader will look at the client base, and they start to, as they get further on in the journey, let go of the smaller clients that they're charging maybe $300, $500 a month for CAS services or bookkeeping services. And they're starting to take on larger clients and that are charging. And I'd say in CAS, I see a range of about $2,000 to $8,000 a month. That seems to be the range of the monthly cost for services. And they're now saying, "I don't want the $500 a month clients. I want the $5,000 a month clients," right? And then so they have to free up their team from shifting the smaller clients to these more complex clients that are a lot more revenue. And so that's where I continue to see, 5 years down the journey, now they're really starting to bring more CFO services, which CPA.com calls it 2.0 services, where they're selling more of the budgeting and forecasting and the future, looking out into how you can make some tweaks for your revenue to be more. So that's sort of in my mind how I see that journey.
Yeah, that's interesting. So the way I interpret that, and you tell me if I'm wrong here or not, but early on, somebody's kind of taking this on as a passion project, and we've come across this too. There's no real budget, but it's like make something happen. Once they see any kind of material traction, somewhere around 2 million, maybe it's healthy 6 figures, low 7 figures, it's like, goodness gracious, there's so much opportunity here. We'll put a real cast leader on it. Maybe in the original implementation, it was like, we'll do some forecasting, like we'll tinker with like, we'll give you some benchmarking of how you're doing in the industry. We'll give you some forecasting. We'll adjust some things. But then on their journey up, they have those set of clients where they're doing kind of full blown outsourced CFO services, and they're fantastic clients. They're doing the 5K a month or 8K a month.
Yeah.
And that's when that leader comes in. Do you typically see they're going to start building out and hiring CFO talent
Yes.
to kind of go more into that market? Is that a common, am I hearing everything correctly? And then is that
Correct. The only
hiring?
thing that I didn't mention, which is really important to mention, that I see start happening in like when they're 3 years in their journey, is they start becoming very process minded and putting a lot more standardization and processes in place. Initially, when you're getting started, you take on any clients, you use whatever technology, you'll use the client's technology. But then as you're growing, and if you want to continue to grow and you have aggressive growth goals, then I kind of see that leader come in and sort of hit the pause button. And they analyze the whole book of business. And then they also look at the tools that it has in place. And they start standardizing and saying, hey, we need to have a tech stack that's standardized, that we tell our clients, if you want to work with us, you're going to use our tools so that we can deliver the best services. We vet out the tools we want to use, if it's QBO, if it's Xero, if it's Bill, if it's Expensify, but they want to standardize. It's also easier for the employees to have a process, right? Okay, we've landed this new client. We've got an onboarding team that's gone on board to the technology. We're going to clean up their books. And now it's going to come to the monthly team that's going to offer the monthly services. So they put those processes in place. When that processes start happening 2 million, 3 years in, that's when you see, boom, they can really free themselves to like really grow. So you were right, but that was that one piece that I think is really crucial. And when I'm talking to firms, I can hear them, oh, you're in the process stage. Good. Right now I can help you because I focus on the tech, right? Now we can really dig into putting your tech in place and the process in place so that you can really scale to grow.
Yeah, I imagine based on your comment earlier, where if they don't have a seat at the leadership table, then the tech decisions are kind of like inherited from tax and audit. Well, and believe me, this is what we see. Well, tax uses this tool, so we were asked to also use this tool, and it's just incompatible to do any kind of workflow outside of tax. We'll say, right? And so, like, I'm assuming, and so it's spreadsheets, it's Outlook, and it's a little bit of tinkering with whatever tool is inherited from a tax or audit department.
That's one of the biggest struggles I see CAS departments hold them back, if you will, is they don't really have a dedicated budget to work from, right? It's like, hey, go build this. Okay, build it, but use the tools that we use, right? And again, if you are wanting to move to that next level, if you really want to go to, and when I talk to CAS leads, I'll say to them, what are your goals? What revenue are you at now? What revenue do you want to be in 3 years? What revenue do you want to be in 5 years, in 10 years? They'll tell me. They will tell me we're 2 million in revenue now. In 3 years, we want to be 5 million in revenue. And by 2030, we want to be 10 million in revenue. Well, okay, what new dedicated tech do you need to get you to hit those numbers? Because you can't use the firm's tech if you have those aggressive growth, revenue numbers. And if you are building out a new revenue source for the firm, you needed a dedicated budget for dedicated new talent. And to your point, start bringing in those controllers and CFOs for dedicated new tech. And they all kind of look at me like scratch their head. They're like, yeah, we don't have a budget. And they get really frustrated because they're kind of handicapped because the clients are there. There is no lack of need on the client side. There is a supply and demand thing happening, where there's a lot of demand for this. And that's why firms are running towards it. But it's just, and I say this all the time, it's a muscle they haven't built yet. They've built the tax and audit muscle. They have not built the CAS muscle. They're still building it, right? It's not built. And so they're struggling.
Yeah, it's interesting because look at these growth rates. I mean, I think for some firms we talk to, if you're hitting healthy six figures, then this is, oh my gosh, it's working. Oh my gosh. Well, these should be very profitable, services you provide. And so when you're talking, I'm like, well, why? What? Like the margin is there. We're not talking about significant points to pull into, a BotKeeper or anything else. but it's there and you're using inherited tools. So why is it so challenging to get a budget approval when you've proven out a line of business that is so powerful? And I think you hit the nail on the head, which is it's just a muscle that's not flexed very often. It's not very often you launch a service line and
Right.
it gets into 2 million and you're like, oh my gosh, it's working. Well, just keep doing what you're doing. We're like, well, we can't. We
Yeah.
actually need money. Oh, hold on a second. But if they can transform themselves from 2 to 10 million, that process itself is going to make them stronger advisors because this is what all their clients want to do in their own way, right?
Yeah. Well, and I also say, like, you can grow CAS at the rate of technology. So your tech bill will be increasing. Now, traditionally, firms have hired more talent. The more clients you have, the more talent you hire. So they might have a budget for more staff, right? But in the CAS side, especially, you can grow your tech. And so you need to be investing in more technology. And then you actually don't need to hire a lot more people as you service more clients if you do it well with your tech stack. But that is a mind shift, right? Of, oh, like my tech bill's too much. Well, yeah, but tech doesn't quit. Tech doesn't sleep, right? And you don't have to train tech as much as bringing in new talent. So if you have headcount for talent, right, they're giving you a budget for that, but are they giving you a budget for tech? Because your tech bill on the CAS side is going to increase as you take on more clients.
Yeah, it's just like, let P&L, let the margins do the talking, right? I think the situation firms don't want to find themselves in is if they hire like it's a different department and scale up, they have the same ratio and scale up the tech and they're like, "Oh my gosh,
Right.
what's happened to my margin?"
So
It's like, well,
expensive.
you're trying to have both, right? You're trying to
Right.
invest like it's a different kind of service line item, but then you're also building the tech stack. So it is a mindset shift, right? And I think the margins and your P&L should lead you to having confidence in your infrastructure decisions you make.
That's right. That's right. Well, and the other thing I hear a lot is, hiring in a controller or a CFO is expensive. Hiring a bookkeeper, not as expensive. And so they're like, whoa, I don't know if I can afford to bring this new talent into the firm. But that type of talent is going to change your trajectory of offering advisory services on the accounting side, right? They are worth it. Set them loose on 5 to 10 clients, and you can charge a lot more for those services, as well as your bookkeepers are going to be learning from those CFOs on how to have those business discussions. They should be going with the controller and the CFO to the meetings or on the Zoom calls so that they're learning and upskilling, because that's another big thing in CAS. People that come to me, how do I upskill my talent? How do I upskill my talent? Well, there's not a lot. There's not. There's the AICPA, a ton of training on tax and a ton of training on audit. There's not a lot of training in the CAS space. So how do I upskill my talent? Well, that's a great way of doing it. Bring new talent in that has a controllership, CFO experiences on the vertical, especially. If you are going after not-for-profits, bring a CFO that's worked with not-for-profits in. That is going, you can charge more for their services. Yes, they're more expensive, but they're also upskilling your team.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I just think, well, model it out, right? So if you're hiring this person, how many clients do they need to serve? What are you charging? What's your margin? It's like model, and then in turn, you're going to do some of what you just did for modeling your own service line for some of your clients. And so the irony here is nobody's better at modeling this out than the people that need to be modeling it out. So that's, this is the good news.
But the challenge is you need a partner, a dedicated partner to modeling this out and to sitting down and always tweaking the model, right? Always. And a lot of the firms are starting to move over their tax partners or their audit partners to go run the CAS practice. But guess what? They still have one foot in tax and they still have one foot in audit. Well, and a lot of them are in the tax side, right? Well, if your leader is gone 4 months out of the year because they're doing taxes, your CAS services can't stop. You can't not, because it's monthly reoccurring business. It's also monthly reoccurring revenue, which I say is amazing. Like $5,000 a month, 12 months out of the year, forever is really nice revenue. Why is that leader then going over to the tax side during tax season to do $1,000, $2,000 tax return? Because it's what they do. It's because it's what they love. It's really hard to find that leader that gets excited about giving up their book to start this new revenue source and to really model it out and stick to the model and put all of these pieces, I call it pieces of puzzle. There's lots of pieces to the CAS puzzle. There's a lot, and it's not easy. It takes time.
Yeah, well, I mean, I agree, on the value of a 5K a month in perpetuity, if you peg 5K a month client, I don't know, they stay with you for 5 years. Well, that's a 300K client. Stay with you for a decade. That's 600K. And that's assuming they're not being sold anything else or
Upsold.
upsold in any kind of way. And I think, firms have to be very cognizant of the incentives. If you're pulling a tax partner that still has certain benchmarks they need to meet for tax into, hey, this cool little thing, but I mean, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't work, right? And the incentive, whether it's profit dividend or performance review or however it's structured, if this is kind of like this cute little thing over here called CAS, and you have no real target, or it's a target, but it's kind of like, we'll just throw something, 500,000 this year. I don't know. It'd be nice to get it. But tax, we know tax, and you have benchmarks, and there's certain expectations of where to hit. We are always going to lean into where you're incentivized.
Right. That's exactly what's happening.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned something earlier, and I want to hit on it before we wrap up here. These two letters that we can't stop talking about. I think you know where I'm going, AI. And you mentioned, the advances in technology really led to the manifestation of CAS, starting in thereabouts '08 till now. Obviously with ChatGPT and OpenAI, and now, Google has its play, and there's other platforms coming out, and it feels like there's been an explosion in now utility in AI and learning models.
Yep.
And, I personally see a lot of upside for the profession. I think you do too, but I'm curious what you've seen from a broad sense of AI and its impact in the industry. And I'm curious, like, what you're seeing at the ground level of how people might be using it day to day.
Yeah. Well, yes, obviously I saw AI coming, and that's why I moved to BlackKeeper, because I wanted to get in early. I want to be a part of this shift, and it is here. It's here. I mean, we were saying earlier, you can't turn on the TV and you don't see something about AI. ChatGPT was the thing that put AI on the map, and it's in its infancy. It's really 1 year new, right? But there's different types of AI. And so, like you watch Netflix, you watch Instagram, right? You watch Facebook, they're all using AI. So you're using AI because it keeps you addicted, because it tells you what next you want to watch. They know what you like clicking on. And so AI is there. But what does it mean for the profession? And where, do I see the profession going with AI? I envision a world not so far where your customers are going to be able to say, Alexa, what are my Q4 earnings? And Alexa's going to be able to tell them. So it is changing the role of the accountant. We also see AI coming into audit, right? Audit's on the decline from a revenue perspective. Audit's been flat. Tax has had 5% growth. Client accounting has had 20 to 30% growth. And it is because of the technology. And that's where I envision the future of the firm is, because of technologies moving into this advisory space. It can be tax advisory as well as client advisory. But the AI now is going to be bubbling up trends in the data that the human eye couldn't see. And now you've got all this data. It's the power of the data. And by the way, firms sit on so much data, but they're not using it. So data analytics, predictive analytics, all of this is powerful for firms to start, being able to look at the client data, see the trends, because AI is going to bubble it up, right? And be able to help the clients see the trends in the data. I think clients are always going to need the firm to, it's not replacing what they're doing. It is changing the way the work is being done to also be, again, more analytical and advisory. So you can say, hey, your AP was off this month. What happened, right? Your invoicing, wow, you had a great month. What happened? Let's dig into what happened. Also benchmarking, right? You're going to have all this data. We're going to say, okay, you're a chiropractor. I service 50 chiropractors. You made more money in your back cracking than the other chiropractors because you charged 10% more than the other. And you know what I mean? Like, it's just going to change the conversation.
Yeah, I saw, somebody mentioned it was kind of like the rise of spreadsheets and its power on businesses. in the 80s and 90s. If you knew how to use a spreadsheet, you were like superhuman. Oh my gosh, how can you build these data tables and run these reports and pull these graphs? And I think we all became really well versed in running different, scripts and scenarios and formulas in Excel.
Right.
I think a very similar relationship in the finance profession is going to happen with AI. I think people that understand it, like the ones in the 80s and 90s that jumped into Excel early on, they're going to be superhuman. And then the people that are kind of like, put my head in the sand, we'll see what happens. It's going to be like not understanding how to use Excel in the 2000s, right? You're just going to seem irrelevant.
Or QuickBooks. Listen, when QuickBooks was created, it competed with firms because firms did all of that work manually. And then all of a sudden, a piece of technology that a client could buy off the shelf for really, really cheap, they could do it on their own. And so now all of a sudden, all the small businesses stopped going to their accountant for the work and they used this technology called QuickBooks so they could do it themselves, right? Well, what happened? Clients mucked it up. And so clients started calling the firm saying, can you help me with my QuickBooks? So then what did we see? We saw, firms saying, if that's tech you're going to use, I'm going to know it. And I'm going to know it better than you, right? And then they started going in every single month to clean up the books because the clients couldn't keep clean books, right? Now you've got PBOA. So you've got it in the cloud where the firm doesn't have to drive to the client site to manually put in all the data, right? You've got bank feeds, right? And so the tech has kept evolving in our space, but never had to replace the accountant. AI is one more tool, but it's a powerful tool because, again, it's bringing the power of the data. And that's where firms sitting on all this data can now look at it in new ways and change the services, right? Change the discussion, change the conversation.
I love that. I know there's a lot going on at BotKeeper. Would love to hear a little bit more about how you're infusing AI in your platform. And then we'd love to wrap up with, people want to connect with you or learn more about BotKeeper. What's the best way for them to connect?
Yeah, thank you. Well, BotKeeper has been around for 8 years, so we are not new to the AI space. But our founder, Enrico, will tell you it's cost way more and taken a lot longer to get our AI to be about 50 to 70% auto-coding the transactions. So that's where our machines are. Our machines look at how transactions have been coded and can auto-code the transactions in nanoseconds. We have human oversight right now with our bookkeepers in the Philippines. So firms with BotKeeper get both tech and talent to code the transactions. The big news from BotKeeper is we feel we're finally at a place where starting in Q1 of next year, we're launching a new product for firms called Infinite, where they can use just our tech. They don't need to use our talent because our tech is there. So that's very exciting that firms starting next year can just use our technology and let their own talent oversee the AI. Another thing that we announced because we had our AI Unchained conference is that we have a partnership with Google. Google was an investor in BotKeeper very early on. And so we've advanced our partnership with Google where we are using some of their tech that's not launched to the public right now. It's called Vertex, where we're going to be able to bring the data to the firms and their clients' data to the firm in a way the firm can be easily analytical and advisory. Because we're seeing a gap of, the bookkeepers that are feeling threatened because the AI is going to be coding the transactions that they're manually doing. And they don't know really, they're not comfortable going into that advisory space. We're going to bubble up the trends to them in an easy way to help them easily move into that consulting space. And then the other big announcement is a partnership that we have with Giraffe. And so additionally in Q1, firms through BotKeeper are going to have a bit of a forecasting tool. So again, everything that BotKeeper is doing is only for firms. We don't work directly with small business, and it's enabling firms to move into that space of advisory.
Wow, that's a lot going on. If somebody wants to follow, reach out, learn more, where should they go?
They can contact me. It's easy. It's Deneen, DENEEN at botkeeper.com. And I'm happy to point them in directions or share. We've got a lot of blogs that we've posted on all of the 3 hot things that I just announced.
All right. Super exciting. Well, Deneen, I appreciate you coming on and chatting about the wonderful world of CAS and AI. If folks can write down all the points we talked about today, you can go to jetpackworkflow.com/blog. That's jetpackworkflow.com/blog. We'll do a full write-up. We'll link everything up there. If you enjoyed today's interview, leave a review. It helps us get the word out. And if you really loved it, share it with a fellow firm owner or department leader or cast leader that needed to hear something that was talked about today. Maybe it was about the critical hires you need to make at a certain scale. Maybe it was transitioning from, I'll call it the scrappy upstart kind of mindset to, okay, now we're going to scale it from 2 to 10. Maybe it was something we talked about in AI. Share it with somebody that needed to hear this information. Deneen, thanks again for coming on.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you for joining Growing Your Firm, the podcast series for global, small, and medium-sized businesses ready to scale and increase profits. You can check out more podcasts by following the links in the show notes. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you're listening. At Jetpack Workflow, we're all about maximizing returns for accounting firms and CPAs. Check out more podcasts on growing your firm and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.